Here's though we'll have time for one more round here. We have got a 3-minute round, I think. Conservatives, Mr. O'Toole.
Any rounds before Mr. Neufeld leaves?
Ms. May, you are not a signed-in member of this committee, and I would need unanimous consent for that to happen. I don't appear to have it.
Do you have a secret code? I didn't hear anything.
Well, I saw a couple of heads shake, so I'm just looking at.
Whose head was that? Yeah. Point of order.
Mr. Sims?
I'm quoting from the Elections Newfoundland and Labrador. It is also possible for a DRO or poll clerk who is working at the polling station to visibly identify an elector if he or she knows the individual and can vouch that he or she is who they claim to be.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. You got that on the record. Not really a point of order. Mr. O'Toole, 3 minutes, please. It may be 2 minutes now, folks, but let's...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll table the actual compendium that...
You still have a 4-minute round. We'll
Wonderful.
be getting to the shorter round after. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll table after the compendium that Mr. Neufeld refers to himself. That actually does a comparative overview at polling day registration. That says here clearly that Newfoundland Labrador electors must produce proper identification and take an oath. And to review where we were, 4 of the 13 jurisdictions on a provincial level and most municipal levels do not permit vouching. And I referenced the decision of the majority of the Supreme Court that clearly said that legislation provides that irregularities should be held in the same way as fraud if, as per your second point, they can impact the result. And so we are spending a lot of time saying, is there nefarious conduct going on, when we really should be saying there's a 42 to an 80% error rate with vouching that most jurisdictions don't use, that Mr. Neufeld, you yourself said will form an immense challenge to fix. So
talk about 2 alternatives. One is what's called a tendered ballot. And this is where somebody in a special situation, like a vouching situation, casts a ballot, but their ballot is put into an envelope. It's actually put into 2 envelopes. The first envelope is a secrecy envelope, and then the envelope that surrounds it is an envelope that has all the details about the individual and what the conditions were that they cast their vote under, and that allows opportunity after the election day is over for the returning officer with the scrutineers from the parties and the candidates to look at these.
Can you quickly go on the second one?
Second one is the approach used in Manitoba. Now, if you want to read an election act that's actually written in plain language, Manitoba is, I think, the best example in the country. Section 2 of that act, the Manitoba Elections Act, establishing identity. A person who is required to establish his or her identity under this act may do so by providing. Now, Section 129 says every voter has to establish their identity. They may do so by providing an official document issued by a federal, provincial, or municipal government that contains the person's name and photograph. Kind of like our first step in the document you have there from Elections Canada. B, at least 2 documents that provide evidence of the person's identity satisfactory to the election official in question. That's like the second part of the Elections Canada arrangement. But here's the difference. Instead of vouching, it says, if none of the documents provided contains a current address, the person must make a signed declaration as to his or her current address. So there's no vouching, there's a signed declaration. There's a paper trail, there's integrity to the process, and you're not disenfranchising.
The tendered balloting you suggested with multiple envelopes and the like certainly suggests even more administrative challenges for a fairly small amount of training for our officials that a large part of your report looked at, as well as administering of oaths. There's 7 oaths that are currently administered, which is also a burden. But going back to this, option 1, 2, and 3, 3 being vouching, if we take off vouching, option 3, like a lot of other jurisdictions do, which we established, what are we left with? You know, I'm an average guy. If I showed up to vote, I would have, you know, my driver's license, which, as you said, over 85% tend to have. And if we just go through, you know, and I don't, health card, acceptable, 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 acceptable.
Which one's got your address?
Acceptable.
We'll give Mr. O'Toole a chance to put his wallet back together. And I think we're now stuck to about a 2-minute round. Mr. Hahn? Mr. O'Toole? Mr. O'Toole? Thank you. Your time is well completed. Mr. Hahn, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. So I'll have to be really quick. Mr. Neufeld, people, and this is going to be a little bit more general, people cheated taxes, EI claims, insurance claims, whatever. Does it not make sense that there will always be people who will try to game a system like elections, no matter what, just based on human nature? And you've all seen it. Quickly.
There's several kinds of fraud, and I've worked around parts of the world where election fraud is a real problem. I've seen vote buying, I've seen ghost voting, double counting, electoral manipulation such as the misuse of absentee ballots, misinformation to voters, intimidation, invalidation or destruction of ballots,
on human nature.
misrecording of voting results. Those are all election fraud. Voting fraud, where voters actually show up and impersonate someone else or vote more than once, in my experience, is very rare.
Okay, because VIC cards were not allowed as a singular form of ID in 2006, and I'm referencing 2006, and I'll have more to say about that when I'm in your seat next week. And multiple voting were not allowed in 2006.
You didn't require ID in 2006.
You could go in fact, with a voter ID card and do it. It wasn't allowed. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. Because something is not allowed, does that automatically mean it's not attempted and couldn't be successful?
No, let's distinguish what we're talking about here. Before 2007, if you were on the voters list and you showed up at your polling station and announced who you were given a ballot.
Correct. Correct. And so, the comments that I made that my, not that colleague, but his partner across the floor tried to impugn just now in the House of Commons, saying that what I had said was clearly not true. VIC cards were allowed and used in 2006.
Now, VIC cards were a piece of information to tell voters when they could vote, where they could vote.
And they were used as ID. Now, that changed in 2007, partly because of the complaint that we filed officially with the Commissioner of Elections.
Mr. Hahn?
And things changed after that, which was a good thing.
Thank you. And I know we'll get back to that. Mr. Christopherson, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Neufeld, for being here today. You're the third of the trilogy of giants that Canadians have needed to hear from on this. Mr. Mayorand and Mr. Kingsley before you. And like yourself, my words, they've all but shredded the idea that eliminating vouching strengthens our election process anyway. I want to just return to some of your comments and then ask a question at the end of it, and I'm very mindful of my time. Having listened this is you, quote, having listened carefully to what the minister has said, it's my opinion that he has not interpreted my report correctly. Voters were not the problem. The problem was with the system. My report concludes that this is a systemic problem related to our antiquated model for voting. At no point in the report do I link vouching with fraudulent voting. I've heard the minister articulate that the absence of evidence of voter fraud doesn't mean that it isn't happening. I've heard him further suggest Elections Canada simply isn't aware of the voter fraud because the agency hasn't investigated. However, over the course of my study, I have heard of no candidate scrutineers, voters, or media representatives ever raising an issue with respect to vouching fraud. I am not aware of any formal complaints in this regard. And lastly, here's the thing, your words. A large number of irregularities did occur, but there is no evidence whatsoever that any voters fraudulently misrepresented themselves in the vouching process. It looks to me like your words have just left a smoldering mass of discredited rhetoric in terms of the minister's words. Is there anything about eliminating vouching that would strengthen our electoral system, or is it clear if we eliminate it, we weaken our system?
I don't think that eliminating vouching will improve the integrity of elections in Canada at all, and I am fearful that it will considerably reduce accessibility to the ballot for people who are guaranteed the right to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Thank you, Mr. Christopherson. Good timing on that, by the way. Mr. Lukiski for 2 minutes to finish us off. Sorry, Mr. Reid for 2 minutes to finish us off.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Neufeld. You referred to something you called tendered voting, which sounds a lot like a version of what we do if we cast a postal ballot. You put an envelope inside, or you put a ballot inside an anonymity envelope, which goes inside an envelope that has some kind of signature, I gather, and other information on it. Two questions for you. You can answer both of them and fill up the remaining time. Number one, I assume this is used in several jurisdictions. I wonder if you could just mention what some of those are. And number two, if that system were in place, but vouching were removed, would it resolve the issues you've raised with regard to vouching and the ability of every Canadian to cast a ballot?
It could be engineered in a way where it allowed that. Now, vouching is undoubtedly a complex process. It's resisted in many jurisdictions because it delays your official voting result. It's been a feature in British Columbia for many, many decades. It is the way in which the province has enacted the ability for any registered voter or any eligible voter in British Columbia to vote at any voting location. And this is right from the days the writs are issued until election day. So if they, for some reason, cannot get to their assigned voting place, they can vote at any other voting place in the province. But because they're not on the list for whatever place they're attending at, their ballot goes into what's called a tendered ballot envelope. And those all get shipped back and forth across the province in the 10 days that follow the election. And then on that 10th day, they're all reviewed and scrutinized and counted. If a person has voted before, their vote is not allowed. If they're not registered and they claim they were, their vote is not allowed. And it allows that scrutiny, which may be something that could be engineered for the vouching process.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. We have run out of time for this hour of our study today, so I will suspend for just a minute while Mr. Neufeld, we thank you for your testimony today.